I still remember the smell of gasoline and burnt metal the morning I walked into Blackstone Industrial Safety Group for my interview. Houston was already hot even though the sun had barely climbed over the skyline, and my cheap gray shirt was sticking to my back before I even stepped through the gates. I stood there for a few seconds outside the refinery, staring at the giant pipes twisting through the air like steel snakes. Smoke drifted from distant towers while workers in orange safety suits moved around with clipboards and radios clipped to their shoulders. Everything about the place screamed power, money, and danger. And honestly, I didn't belong there. At least that's what my family would have said. 3 months earlier, my father had looked me in the eyes and told me to get out of his house after finding out I was gay. No screaming, no dramatic fight, just cold disappointment. Somehow that hurt worse. Since then, I'd been surviving in Houston alone. Cheap apartment. Instant noodles. Night shifts at a gas station. I barely had enough money left to keep my phone turned on. That job interview wasn't just important to me. It was survival. A tall blonde woman holding a clipboard called my name from across the yard. Ethan Carter? I quickly straightened my posture. Yeah, that's me. Follow me. Physical evaluations are starting. I nodded and followed her through a fenced training field where around 20 other applicants were already stretching and warming up. Most of them looked older than me. Bigger too. Former military types. Thick arms. Broad shoulders. Guys who looked born for industrial work. Meanwhile, I looked like the wrong person standing in the wrong movie. One guy glanced at me and smirked. Pretty boy ain't lasting 10 minutes. A few others laughed quietly. I ignored them. I'd spent my entire life learning how to ignore men like that. The first test was running. 5 laps around the industrial training ground under brutal Texas heat. By the second lap, half the applicants were already breathing hard. But I kept going. I pushed through the burning in my lungs, through the sweat running down my neck, through the memories of sleeping hungry some nights because I couldn't afford food. Pain didn't scare me anymore. When I crossed the finish line first, even the instructors looked surprised. Then came push-ups, then weighted equipment carries, then climbing drills, then chin-ups hanging from a steel frame while supervisors counted loudly below us. One more. Keep going. Don't quit now. My arms felt like they were tearing apart by the end, but I still outperformed almost everyone there. And for the first time in months, I felt proud of myself again. One of the supervisors checked my score sheet and gave a low whistle. Kids got insane stamina. Another nodded. Best endurance score today. I tried not to smile too much, but inside I felt hope creeping back into my chest. Maybe I actually had a chance. Maybe my life was finally about to change. Then came the final measurement station. Height check. The moment I'd been dreading all day. I stepped against the measuring wall while an older supervisor adjusted the bar over my head. His expression changed instantly. That can't be right, another man muttered. The supervisor measured again. Same result. A silence settled around the table. I already knew what they were thinking because I'd memorized the company requirements online weeks ago. I was slightly under the minimum height standard. Not by much, but enough. One supervisor sighed and closed the folder halfway. Damn shame. Another leaned closer and whispered something I still heard clearly. Kid would have passed everything else. My stomach dropped. Just like that, all the confidence drained out of me. I looked around the yard at the refinery towers in the distance and felt panic rising in my throat. I couldn't lose this job. I literally had nothing left. One of the supervisors shook his head. Rules are rules. That's when I noticed him for the first time. Standing farther back near the fence line was a man dressed differently from everyone else. Black button-up shirt, rolled sleeves, expensive watch, broad shoulders, sharp jaw covered in light stubble. Older, confident, dangerously calm. The others carried clipboards. He carried authority. Even before someone whispered his name beside me, I knew he was important. Daniel Brooks, the head safety director, 47 years old, and staring directly at me, not casually either, intensely, like he'd been watching me for a while. When our eyes met, something strange happened in my chest. I should have looked away. Instead, I held his gaze. His expression barely changed, but I noticed the tiny details. The way his eyes moved slowly over me. The way his jaw tightened slightly when another supervisor dismissed me. I'd seen that look before. Men had looked at me that way my whole life. Desire mixed with restraint. And suddenly, my brain started working faster than my fear. I straightened my posture a little more. Held eye contact a second longer than necessary. Then gave the smallest nervous smile. Not fake. Just enough. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting. One supervisor was already reaching to remove my application from the stack when Daniel finally started walking toward us. Every conversation nearby died instantly. Even the loud workers across the yard seemed quieter around him. "What's the issue?" he asked calmly. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Height requirement problem." Daniel took the folder from his hands and looked through my scores silently. I watched his face carefully while my heart hammered against my ribs. His eyes paused at my endurance numbers. Then my strength scores. Then finally my name. Ethan Carter. For a second, he looked up at me again. And this time the silence between us felt personal. "How old are you?" he asked. 24. "You ever worked refinery safety before?" "No, sir. But I learn fast." His lips twitched slightly at that. One supervisor spoke up carefully. "Even if we wanted to pass him, policy also values performance." Daniel interrupted coldly. Nobody argued after that. He closed the file slowly before speaking again. "Put him under my department. I'll evaluate him personally." The air around us changed instantly. A few supervisors exchanged looks. One guy from earlier muttered under his breath, clearly jealous. But none of them challenged him. Because Daniel Brooks clearly wasn't the kind of man people challenged. Relief hit me so hard I almost lost balance. I got the job. I actually got it. Daniel handed the folder back without looking away from me. "Orientation starts Monday. Don't disappoint me, Ethan." His deep voice sent heat crawling up my spine for reasons I didn't fully understand. "Yes, sir," I answered quietly. But the way he kept staring at me after that made me feel like the interview wasn't actually over. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Paperwork, safety instructions, ID photos. But every now and then I'd catch Daniel watching me from across the facility. Never smiling, never obvious, just watching, like he was studying something dangerous. Around 7 that evening, when almost everyone had already left the building, a female assistant approached me near the locker room. "Mr. Brooks wants to see you in his office." My pulse instantly sped up. I followed her upstairs into the executive section of the refinery building. The halls were quieter there, cleaner, expensive dark wood walls instead of steel and concrete. She stopped outside a large office door. "You can go in." I swallowed hard before stepping inside. Daniel was standing near the window overlooking the refinery lights outside. His tie was loosened slightly now, sleeves rolled higher on his forearms. The office door clicked shut behind me. Then I heard the lock turn. My breath caught. Daniel turned slowly toward me, calm as ever. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then his eyes moved over my body again with slow precision before he finally said in that deep, controlled voice, "I think we need another physical evaluation." The first week working under Daniel Brooks felt like walking into a fire I knew would eventually burn me alive. And somehow, I still kept moving closer. Every morning at Blackstone Industrial Safety Group started before sunrise. The refinery lights glowed against the dark Houston sky while giant flames danced from distant gas towers. Workers moved through the industrial maze carrying helmets and equipment while radios crackled endlessly around us. But no matter how chaotic the refinery became, my attention always found him. Daniel Brooks. The man barely smiled, barely spoke unless necessary, and somehow controlled an entire facility with nothing more than his voice and presence. The moment he entered a room, conversations straightened themselves out. During training hours, he treated me harder than everyone else. Again. Faster. "You call that safe procedure? Keep your eyes open, Ethan." In public, he was ruthless with me. Cold. Demanding. untouchable. But when nobody else was around, everything changed. Those extra physical evaluations quickly became our excuse. At first, they sounded professional enough. Late-night endurance drills, private safety simulations, emergency response training, additional physical conditioning. Nobody questioned it because Daniel had personally assigned himself to oversee me. But after a while, I started noticing the small things. The way his eyes stayed on me longer than necessary whenever I lifted equipment. The way his hand would linger against my waist while correcting my posture during harness training. The way his voice lowered whenever we were alone. One night, we were running emergency stairwell drills through an empty section of the refinery tower. I was exhausted halfway through the climb, sweat soaking through my shirt while alarms echoed through the practice corridors. Daniel stopped suddenly on the platform above me. "Come on," he said firmly. "I'm trying," I muttered between breaths. His eyes moved over my face carefully before he stepped closer. "You push yourself too hard." The concern in his voice caught me off guard. I laughed softly. "That's rich coming from you." For the first time, I saw the corner of his mouth twitch upward. That tiny, almost smile affected me more than it should have. God, I was in trouble. As weeks passed, our routine became dangerous. Coffee together after midnight reports. Long elevator rides filled with unbearable silence and tension. Private office meetings that lasted longer than necessary. And every single time he touched me, even accidentally, I felt it for hours afterward. The worst part? I started realizing this wasn't just survival anymore. At first, I'd use charm because I needed the job. Needed stability. Needed someone powerful enough to save me from drowning. But Daniel slowly became more than that. One evening during a safety simulation, I sliced my palm open on a sharp metal edge while securing damaged equipment. "Shit," I hissed. Blood instantly dripped down my fingers. Daniel crossed the room immediately. "Let me see. I'm fine." "Ethan." That voice again. Calm but impossible to disobey. I slowly held out my hand. He guided me into his office without another word and sat me down beside his desk. Then he grabbed the first aid kit himself instead of calling medical staff. That alone surprised me. A man like him normally delegated everything. But not with me. He crouched in front of my chair while carefully cleaning the cut. His large hands held mine steadily, gently. The refinery lights outside painted orange reflections across his face. "You need stitches?" I asked quietly. "No," he kept focusing on my hand. "You got lucky." I stared at him silently while he wrapped the bandage around my palm. Up close, he looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like life had been slowly wearing him down for years. "You ever sleep?" I asked softly. That finally made him glance up at me. "Rarely." Something about the honesty in his eyes made my chest tighten. I swallowed carefully. "Why?" For a second, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned back slightly and sighed. "My ex-wife used to ask me the same thing." That surprised me. "You were married?" 12 years. I stayed quiet while he finished tying the bandage. "We divorced 5 years ago," he continued calmly. "I have a son, 21. You talk to him much?" A shadow crossed his face instantly. "Not really." I regretted asking immediately, but after a long silence, he surprised me again. "He thinks I cared more about work than family." "You didn't." His eyes met mine. "I cared about surviving." The way he said it felt heavier than the words themselves. And suddenly I understood something. Daniel Brooks wasn't just lonely. He was hiding. His entire life. Everything about him started making sense after that. The emotional distance. The cold professionalism. The way he constantly watched himself before speaking. A man like him probably spent decades pretending to be someone else. Pretending to be straight. Pretending to be emotionally empty. Pretending not to look at men the way he looked at me. And somehow that realization hurt me more than my own problems. After that night, the tension between us deepened into something emotional. Real. Sometimes we'd stand silently inside crowded elevators while workers talked around us. Yet it felt like we were the only two people breathing. Sometimes he'd adjust the straps on my safety vest during inspections, his fingers brushing slowly against my chest before immediately pulling away when someone walked nearby. And every time that happened, I noticed the same frustration in his eyes, like he hated wanting me this much. One rainy evening after a 12-hour shift, we sat alone in the break room drinking terrible coffee while thunder shook the refinery windows outside. "You ever think about leaving Houston?" he asked suddenly. "All the time. What stops you?" I stared down at my coffee cup for a moment. "No place wants me enough yet." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Daniel went quiet. Then very softly he asked, "Your family?" I nodded once. "They're religious." He looked away immediately like he understood too well. For several seconds, only rain filled the silence between us. Then Daniel finally spoke again, quieter this time. "There's nothing wrong with you, Ethan." I almost broke right there, because nobody had ever said those words to me like they truly meant them. Not once. And the terrifying part was, I believed him. By the second month, people around the refinery started noticing us. The extra training sessions, the special assignments, the way Daniel trusted me more than employees who'd worked there for years. Whispers followed me through hallways, some jealous, some suspicious. One man especially watched us carefully. Brandon Hayes, 35 years old, senior safety officer, loud mouth.
Permanent fake smile.
He acted friendly around executives but treated most workers like garbage. And from the beginning, he hated me. Mostly because Daniel kept choosing me for high-priority training opportunities Brandon wanted for himself. One afternoon during equipment inspection, Brandon cornered me near the storage bay. "You know people are talking about you, right?" I kept checking inventory sheets without looking up. "People always talk." He smirked. "Not usually this much." I finally looked at him. There was something ugly in his eyes, the kind of bitterness that enjoyed destroying people. "You got lucky," he continued. "Daniel doesn't usually take personal interest in trainees." I shrugged casually even though my pulse quickened. "Maybe I work harder than you." His smile disappeared instantly. That hit a nerve. Good. But after that conversation, Brandon started paying closer attention to everything. Watching us during training. Watching Daniel watching me. Watching every small interaction. And Brandon Hayes was not a stupid man. One night after most employees had gone home, Brandon sat alone inside the administrative records office scrolling through hiring files on a computer screen. My file. My interview scores. Medical evaluations. Performance reports. Then finally, height measurement results. His eyes narrowed slowly. A smile spread across his face as he leaned back in his chair. Because there it was. Proof. I technically failed the hiring requirements. Brandon stared at the screen for several long seconds before quietly whispering to himself. "Now I know how to destroy both of them." The rumors started on a Monday morning. By lunchtime, the entire refinery knew. Nobody said it directly to my face at first, but I could feel it in the silence every time I entered a room. Conversations stopped too quickly. People looked away too fast. A few workers smirked whenever Daniel walked past me during inspections. Something had changed, and deep down I already knew why. I was checking oxygen tank reports in the equipment bay when two workers walked behind me whispering loud enough for me to hear. "So it's true. Come on, man. You really think the kid got hired naturally?" A low laugh followed. "He probably got on his knees before he ever got the uniform." My grip tightened around the clipboard so hard my knuckles turned white. The worst part wasn't the insult. It was the fear that maybe everyone already believed it. By the end of the week, anonymous emails started circulating through company accounts. Nobody knew who sent them, but everybody saw them. Claims that Daniel Brooks manipulated hiring records. Claims that I failed the physical requirements. Claims that I was sleeping with the head safety director to keep my position. Some messages even included screenshots from my evaluation file, including the height measurement. I felt my entire world collapsing one hallway at a time. Workers stopped treating me normally. Some openly mocked me now. Others avoided me completely because they didn't want involvement in the scandal. One afternoon during lunch, I sat alone at a corner table while the cafeteria buzzed around me. Usually there were always empty seats nearby. That day, every chair around me stayed untouched. Like I was contagious. I stared at my untouched food while humiliation burned through my chest. Then suddenly someone sat directly across from me. Daniel. The cafeteria instantly went quiet. He looked calm as always, but I noticed the tension in his jaw. "You skipped morning training," he said quietly. I wasn't feeling social. His eyes studied my face carefully. "You're letting them get inside your head." I laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say. Ethan."
No, seriously.
I looked up at him finally. "Do you know what people are calling me now?" Daniel's expression darkened instantly. "I'll deal with it. That's the problem." My voice cracked slightly. "You always deal with everything for me." A dangerous silence settled between us. Around us, workers pretended not to listen while obviously listening to every word. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You think I regret hiring you?" I didn't answer, because lately, I wasn't sure anymore. 2 days later, corporate management arrived from Dallas. Internal investigation. That phrase spread across the refinery faster than fire. Suddenly, everyone acted nervous. Executives in suits filled conference rooms. Employee interviews started. Files were reviewed. Security footage was requested. And Daniel looked more exhausted every day. Still, he kept trying to protect me. He removed me from public shifts to avoid harassment. Assigned me private training work. Personally defended my performance records during meetings. But instead of comforting me, it made everything worse. Because now I couldn't stop asking myself one question. Would I even be there if Daniel didn't want me? One night I finally broke. I stormed into Daniel's office after hearing another supervisor joke that I was the director's favorite toy. Daniel looked up from paperwork immediately. "What happened? You tell me." His eyes narrowed. "Ethan." No, my voice shook with anger. "I want the truth." He slowly stood from behind the desk. "What truth? Did you hire me because I deserved it?" I swallowed hard. "Or because you wanted me?" Silence. The refinery lights outside flickered through the office windows while tension filled every inch of the room. Daniel stared at me for several long seconds before answering carefully. "You earned your position." "That's not what I asked." His jaw tightened. I stepped closer. "Would you have fought for me if I looked different?" "Stop. Would you?" "Ethan, answer me." The sudden pain in his eyes almost made me regret yelling. Almost. "You think this is easy for me?" He snapped suddenly, voice deeper now. "You think I wanted any of this to happen? Then why did you look at me like that from the beginning?" Because that was the real problem. I remembered every stare, every touch, every private meeting, every moment that blurred the line between professional and personal. And now all those moments felt poisoned. Daniel ran a hand through his hair in frustration before finally saying the words I dreaded most. "Yes." The room went completely silent. He looked directly into my eyes. "Yes, I noticed you. Yes, I wanted you. From the moment I saw you." My chest tightened painfully. "But that doesn't mean you didn't deserve the job. You should have let me fail." The hurt on his face became almost unbearable. "You don't mean that." "I do now." For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Daniel quietly asked, "Are you leaving?" I looked at the man I'd fallen in love with. The man who made me feel wanted for the first time in my life. And somehow, at that moment, he was also the man destroying me. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered. Then I walked out. And this time he didn't stop me. I quit Blackstone the next morning.
No goodbye.
No dramatic speech. I simply turned in my badge and disappeared. For the next several weeks, Houston felt colder than ever. I picked up temporary construction jobs during the day and trained at a cheap boxing gym at night just to keep myself from thinking. I rebuilt myself piece by piece. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I stopped waiting for someone powerful to save me, because depending on people always came with a price. Still, I couldn't fully erase Daniel from my mind. Every night I remembered the way he looked at me when I left his office. Not angry, destroyed. Then one evening everything changed. I was working late unloading equipment at a small industrial supply warehouse when I noticed something strange on a shipment invoice. Blackstone logos, safety equipment orders, huge numbers. But the listed inventory didn't match the actual deliveries. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then I noticed the approval signature. Brandon Hayes. My stomach dropped instantly. Over the next few days I started digging quietly. And the deeper I looked, the uglier it became. Brandon had been stealing from Blackstone for years. Fake purchase orders, inflated equipment invoices, missing safety gear budgets. He'd been funneling company money through fake suppliers while blaming inventory shortages on operational damage. Millions of dollars. And somehow nobody caught him. Because everybody was too distracted watching Daniel and me implode. A slow smile spread across my face for the first time in weeks. Brandon thought he destroyed me. He had no idea he'd just handed me the weapon to destroy him back. So I gathered everything. Invoices, photos, transfer records,
Audio recordings.
I built my revenge carefully and patiently. And then I waited for the perfect moment. That moment came during Blackstone's annual corporate safety conference. The biggest event of the year. Executives, investors, department heads, everybody important in one room. I walked into the conference hall wearing a black suit the morning of the event, and the reactions were immediate. Whispers exploded instantly. Some people looked shocked, others nervous. Then I saw Daniel across the ballroom. The moment his eyes landed on me, he froze completely. God, he looked terrible. Tired. Thinner. Like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. For one painful second, neither of us looked away. Then Brandon noticed me too, and smiled confidently. Big mistake. The conference presentation had barely started when I stood up from the back row. Actually, I interrupted loudly. Before we discuss refinery safety, I think we should discuss missing safety funds first. The room fell silent instantly. Brandon's smile disappeared. I walked calmly toward the projector system carrying a folder thick with evidence. What is this? One executive demanded. I plugged in the drive. Screens filled with invoices, bank records, supplier fraud reports, missing equipment logs. Every single document connected directly to Brandon Hayes. The entire room erupted into chaos. Brandon shot to his feet immediately. This is bullshit. No, I said coldly. This is accounting. His face turned red instantly. You lying little. Sit down. Daniel's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. For the first time in weeks, I saw the full power of Daniel Brooks unleashed. Terrifying. Controlled. Deadly calm. Brandon started panicking now, yelling at executives, denying everything, sweating through his collar while evidence kept appearing across the giant screens. One executive looked furious. Another immediately called corporate legal staff. And Brandon finally snapped. This is all because of him, he shouted while pointing at me. You ruined this company over some boy you wanted to sleep with. The ballroom went dead silent. Every eye turned toward Daniel. This was it. The moment that could destroy him forever. For several long seconds, Daniel said nothing. Then slowly he stood. His expression remained calm despite the storm around him. And then, in front of the entire company, he finally said the words he'd probably spent his whole life terrified to admit. Yes. The silence became suffocating. Daniel looked directly at me when he continued. Yes, I love him. My breath caught instantly. And I would choose him again every single time. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Brandon looked horrified. Executives looked stunned. And Daniel kept his eyes on me the entire time. Like after years of hiding, he was finally free. After the conference, everything at Blackstone changed overnight. Brandon Hayes was escorted out of the building by corporate security before the event even ended. Rumors spread for weeks about lawsuits, fraud investigations, and missing company funds. Executives from Dallas stayed at the refinery almost every day cleaning up the damage he left behind. And Daniel? Daniel became a legend inside the company. Some employees respected him more after what happened. Others whispered behind his back. But for the first time in his life, he stopped caring. The strange part was that after finally confessing everything publicly, he didn't contact me. No calls. No texts. No pressure. It was like he believed he'd already lost me. And honestly, maybe part of him thought he deserved to. 3 nights after the conference, I found myself standing outside Blackstone again. The refinery looked different at night now. Quieter. Colder. The giant flames burned against the dark Houston sky while distant machinery hummed endlessly in the background. I sat inside my car for almost 10 minutes staring at the executive building, trying to convince myself not to go inside. But my heart had already made the decision before my brain caught up. When I reached Daniel's office floor, most of the lights were off. The hallway was silent except for the low buzz of air conditioning. His office door was slightly open. I pushed it gently. Daniel was sitting alone behind his desk in darkness except for the city lights glowing through the windows behind him. For a moment he didn't notice me, and seeing him like that hurt more than I expected. He looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally empty, like a man who finally stopped pretending to be strong. When he finally looked up and saw me standing there, his entire body froze. Neither of us spoke. Then quietly, almost carefully, he stood from his chair. "I didn't think you'd come back." His voice sounded rougher than usual. I closed the office door behind me slowly. I almost didn't. A painful silence settled between us. God. After everything that happened, I still loved him. That was the terrifying part. Daniel looked down briefly before speaking again.
I'm sorry.
I swallowed hard. You already said that. Not enough. His eyes finally met mine again, and I saw something inside them I'd never seen before. Fear. Real fear. Not fear of losing his job. Not fear of public humiliation. Fear of losing me. "I should have protected you better," he said quietly. "I should have been honest with myself before any of this happened." I stepped closer slowly. "You were scared. I was a coward."
No, iwisparat.
"You were surviving." That hit him hard. I saw emotion crack through the calm mask he always wore. Daniel turned away for a second and rubbed his hand across his face like he was trying to pull himself together. "You changed my life, Ethan." His voice almost broke saying it. "I spent 47 years hiding who I was. Pretending. Lying to everyone around me, including myself." He laughed bitterly. "Then you walked into that refinery smiling at me like you could already see through all of it." I looked down for a moment before quietly admitting the truth I'd hidden since the beginning. "At first, I used you." Daniel frowned slightly. "I knew you were attracted to me during the interview," I confessed softly. "And I needed that job so badly I decided to use whatever advantage I had." The room went silent. I forced myself to continue. "I flirted with you on purpose. The eye contact, the smiles, all of it." My chest tightened painfully. "I thought if I could keep your attention long enough, maybe I'd survive." Daniel stared at me quietly. Then, after several long seconds, he surprised me again. "I know." That caught me completely off guard. "What?" A tiny tired smile appeared on his face. "Ethan, I'm 47 years old." I noticed. Despite everything, I laughed softly through the emotion building in my throat. Then suddenly tears hit me harder than expected. Weeks of humiliation, fear, loneliness, pain. Everything finally cracked open at once. "I didn't mean to fall in love with you," I whispered brokenly. Daniel crossed the room toward me immediately. "And I didn't mean to need you this much." The second his arms wrapped around me, I completely fell apart. For the first time in months, I let someone hold me while I cried. Daniel held me tightly against his chest without speaking, his hand moving slowly through my hair while the refinery lights glowed outside the office windows. And eventually he started crying too. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears from a man who spent decades carrying too much alone. That night we stayed in his office for hours talking honestly for the first time. No hiding, no pretending, no professional walls between us anymore. Just two exhausted men finally telling each other the truth. A week later, Daniel asked me to meet someone, his son. I almost threw up from nervousness before we arrived at the restaurant. What if he hates me? I asked quietly while sitting in the parking. Daniel looked strangely nervous too. He probably hates me more right now. That's comforting. To my surprise, Daniel laughed softly, and hearing that sound, real and relaxed, made me realize how much lighter he already seemed. His son, Mason, was tall like him with the same sharp eyes and quiet personality. At first, the dinner felt awkward enough to kill me, but eventually conversation started flowing naturally. Mostly because Mason turned out to be far less judgmental than either of us expected. At one point, he looked between us silently before finally saying something that completely caught Daniel off guard. "You finally look happy." Daniel froze. Mason shrugged casually while taking a sip of his drink. "I've never seen you smile this much before." For several seconds, Daniel couldn't speak. And honestly, neither could I, because after everything he'd lost in life, maybe this was the first time he realized something important. He wasn't losing family anymore. He was rebuilding it. Months passed, then a year, and somehow life slowly became beautiful. I officially became one of Blackstone's top safety officers after completing advanced certification programs Daniel helped push me toward. Except now nobody questioned whether I earned my place, because I proved myself over and over again. Daniel remained head safety director, though these days he smiled more often and terrified employees slightly less. Slightly. Together we moved into a modern penthouse overlooking downtown Houston. Floor-to-ceiling windows, quiet nights above the city lights, coffee together before sunrise shifts. Peace. Real peace. And sometimes late at night, I'd still catch myself staring at him in disbelief. Because the lonely, terrified man who once walked into Blackstone desperate for survival somehow ended up building a life instead. One evening after I received a major promotion, Daniel took me onto the rooftop terrace of our building. Houston glittered beneath us like endless gold. Warm wind moved through the night air while distant traffic echoed below the skyline. I stood beside the railing holding a glass of whiskey when Daniel stepped behind me quietly. His arms wrapped around my waist slowly, comfortably, like home. "You did good today," he murmured near my ear. "You trained me." "No," he kissed the side of my neck softly. "You saved yourself." I turned toward him slowly. The city lights reflected in his eyes while he looked at me with the same intensity one remembered from the very first day we met. Except now there was no fear inside him anymore. "No hiding." Daniel touched my face gently before whispering, "You walked into my company for a job, and became the reason I survived." Then he kissed me softly beneath the Houston skyline while the wind carried the noise of the city around us. And standing there in his arms, I realized something that still feels unreal even now. I thought I was fighting for a career that day, but I accidentally found the first place where I was finally loved without fear. If you were in his place, would you risk your career for a love that could destroy your entire life?